Sorry. Project. What woman? What woman screwed me over so badly that I came up with Denna? I'm going to step sideways. I'm going to do that thing where I talk about the issue rather than answer the question. It's really easy to read a book and assume that you know things about an author's life. For example, people read my 50-word bio and they're like, oh, Rothfuss spent 9 years as an undergrad. And then he wrote a book about a kid who goes to college. And so a lot of this must be based on his experiences, or he probably put his professors in the book or something like that. And I'm like, that is a very sensible train of thought. That's rational, that's reasonable. It's just totally wrong, right? Because I was actually writing those parts of the book when I'd only been in school for a year or two. I started this book way back in '94. And so what you are doing is engaging in a certain amount of guesswork that is not unreasonable, and in this case actually happens to be spot fucking on. So good job, good job. Good job, my sir, salute, I salute you. I salute you. And now this has been recorded, so I'm on record with that. But the truth is, the seed for a character, and actually I'll step around this to actually talk about Ari, because where a character starts has really nothing to do with who the character is, as long as things are done properly. There was a person who lived in Madison, and probably still lives in Madison, and my dad used to tell stories about him. My dad worked as an administrator in a hospital, and what he would do is, there was a guy who lived in Madison, and his name was Tunnel Bob, and a lot of people knew about him because he was constantly getting arrested for being in the steam tunnels underneath the city. Because you've got the university and all the access tunnels, and the hospital had access tunnels, and everyone has access tunnels, and they all kind of touch each other. And there's city maintenance tunnels, and there's sewer tunnels, and there's storm drains, and they all fit together, except they don't fit together because they're all like tiny little fiefdoms, and everyone controls their own. And what happened is Tunnel Bob gets in there, and he's harmless, but you can't have people mucking about in your business. And so everyone calls the police, and the police have to arrest him because he is trespassing, and then he goes to jail. And then he gets out, and he gets right back in the tunnels. And so my dad had the really clever idea is he went to Tunnel Bob and he said, you can volunteer and take a shift once a week for 3 hours. You can be in the tunnels. But the rest of the time you can't. That's the condition of your volunteering. And it's a brilliant solution. This is how you resolve problems, right? Don't keep arresting somebody who is harmless. It's like you said, you can come in on Wednesdays from noon to 3, and because he's a volunteer, it's sanctioned, but still nobody else can just wander into the tunnels. You've resolved the whole issue. And Bob was never going to jeopardize this precious sanctioned time in the tunnels. And so my dad would come back and tell me these stories about Tunnel Bob, where one time apparently he got arrested for being in the university's tunnels, and he used his phone call to call my dad to say, I won't be able to be in for my volunteer shift. Like, that's how important this was for him to get official use of this tunnel. So and his payment was a Coke. So at the end of his shift, Tunnel Bob would show up at my dad's office. My dad would walk down the hall and buy him a Coke, and they would chat a little bit. And my dad would relate these stories to me, and he said, "So Tunnel Bob, what do you do there in the tunnels?" And I got to paint you a picture of Tunnel Bob. He's like 6'6", 6'8", lean. And he has kind of a deep voice, and he talks kind of slow. And my dad say, so what are you doing there? And he goes, well, in the first hour, I looks around some, and the second hour, I cleans up a bit, and the third hour, well, that's just for me. And I heard this, and I'm like, who is this? Like, this is a great story. It's like, he goes, walks, get him a Coke. He says, so, what are you doing for Christmas? Does Santa bring you presents? And he goes, nope, just coal. And my dad is like, doesn't know if Tunnel Bob is, how serious he is. He's, if you haven't guessed, right, Tunnel Bob is not kind of wired like most of the rest of us. And, my dad's talking to him. He says, well, be careful in there. Don't look at those tunnels too much or you'll wear them out. And Tunnel Bob's like, no, I won't. And then he leaves, and my dad's like, uh-oh. I was kind of just bantering, and maybe he's taking this a little. Then he came back next week, and he's like, well, I'm going to go in for my shift, and I'm going to look at the tunnels, but I'm not going to wear them out. And he's like, and so I would hear these stories. There's like 100 of these little stories, and I'm like, what a cool, and whenever I see something cool in the world, I'm like, I want that. That's mine now. I own that. And so, but I can't just transplant Tunnel Bob into my world. He has no place there. It'd be like bad Photoshop. It would bug you, even if you couldn't put your finger on why. And so what I did is I took kind of the love of the underneath and the strangeness, and it was this tiny seed crystal, and around that we got Ari. Somebody, if you put them next to each other, you would never go, oh, obviously this followed from that. But I would love to be party to that conversation, that they would have. I think they would have a lot to talk about. Okay, we can do just a few